Cyber Threat Brief for July 15, 2026. Microsoft ships a record 622 patches, including 2 days under active exploitation in SharePoint and Active Directory FS. SonicWall warns of 2 day vulnerabilities in SMA 1000 appliances being actively exploited, with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, deadlines set for July 17. Treasury sanctions VPN service and crypto vendors enabling ransomware operations. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Cybersecurity Brief, July 15, 2026. Next section, Critical Alerts. Microsoft, July 2026 Patch Tuesday, record 622 vulnerabilities. Microsoft released patches for 622 vulnerabilities in its July 2026 Patch Tuesday, the largest release in program history. 2 days are under active exploitation. CVE 2026-56164 in SharePoint Server and in Active Directory Federation Services. Allows unauthenticated attackers to escalate privileges over the network through missing authentication in a critical function. Permits authenticated attackers to elevate privileges locally in Active Directory FS through insufficient access control granularity. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, added both to its KEV, Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog with remediation deadlines of July 17 for SharePoint and July 28 for ADFS. The massive patch count stems from Microsoft's AI-driven multi-model agentic scanning harness, M-, that accelerates vulnerability discovery across the Windows codebase. The release includes 57 critical vulnerabilities, primarily remote code execution flaws affecting Windows services, Office applications, SharePoint, SQL Server, and other Microsoft products, and 3 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: patch SharePoint Server and ADFS immediately. Enable AMSI full mode for SharePoint web applications. Review sign-in logs for exploitation indicators. For SharePoint, this is urgent as SharePoint Server 2016 and 2019 reached end of extended support today with no ESU program available. Sources: Talos Security Week. Dark reading the Hacker News. CISA SharePoint hardening alert active exploitation. Chain CISA issued an alert warning of active exploitation targeting on-premises SharePoint Server instances through 3 vulnerabilities. CVE 2026-32201 and attackers establish remote code execution and perform post-exploitation activities, including stealing IIS machine keys and using deserialization techniques to deploy malware and gain persistence. CISA provided specific AMSI and Microsoft Defender antivirus detection signatures, including exploit script/sysp signout rec body, a exploit script/tool pane auth bypass, a exploit script/tool pane auth bypass, C and backdoor msil/leak fang, a for machine key harvesting. Has a CISA KEV deadline of April 28, deadline of July 4, and deadline of July 17, and 5 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: apply July patches immediately. Enable AMSI full mode for SharePoint web applications. Hunt for machine key harvesters before rotating IIS machine keys. Review telemetry for anomalous requests, suspicious worker process activity, web shells, and machine key access. Avoid exposing SharePoint directly to internet. If required, deploy behind Layer 7 reverse proxy with authentication. Block external access to SharePoint Central Administration. Sources: CISA Kev. SonicWall SMA 1000 0 days exploited. CVE 2026-15409. CVE 2026-15410. SonicWall warned of active exploitation targeting 2 day vulnerabilities in secure mobile access. SMA 1000 series appliances affecting versions 6210, 7210, and 8200V. CVE 2026-15409. CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, 10.0, is a critical server-side request forgery vulnerability in the appliance workplace interface, allowing remote unauthenticated attackers to cause the appliance to make requests to unintended locations. CVE 2026-15410, CVSS 7.2, is a high-severity code injection flaw in the appliance management console, allowing authenticated administrators to execute arbitrary OS commands. The vulnerabilities can be chained together. CISA added both to its KEV catalog with a July 17 remediation deadline for federal agencies. Volksity assisted SonicWall's investigation and provided indicators of compromise. Action: update SMA 1000 appliances to hotfix 12.4.33000, 453 or 12 1.5.0 2000, 835 immediately. Check for exploitation indicators in logs. Request to /API/login or /API/logout with HTTP 200 status in extra web access. Log, request to /WSproxy with suspicious host parameters with 101 status. Hotfix rollbacks with path traversal names in control service. Log, and routes for /API/login or /API/logout in /var/lib/unit/conf. JSON, if indicators are present, reimage physical appliances or redeploy virtual appliances, change all passwords, and reset top tokens. Sources: Security Week, The Hacker News, CIS, a KEV. BitLocker bypass publicly disclosed. CVE 2026-50661. Microsoft patched CVE 2026-50661. CVSS 6.1. A publicly disclosed security feature bypass in Windows BitLocker. The vulnerability allows attackers with physical access to bypass BitLocker's device encryption feature and access encrypted data. The flaw was disclosed before Patch Tuesday by an anonymous researcher and continues a series of BitLocker bypasses, including Bitscrig and Yellow Key, from earlier in 2026. While not under active exploitation, organizations should prioritize patching for devices at physical risk. Action: apply July patches for systems with BitLocker enabled, prioritizing laptops and mobile devices at higher physical access risk. No remote exploitation vector exists. Sources: The Hacker News, SANS ISC. Next section, Business and Infrastructure Threats. Progress Share File Zero-Day Disruption, resolved Progress Software, confirmed a zero-day path traversal vulnerability, caused the recent ShareFile Storage Zones controller disruption. The company disabled access to ShareFile for all Storage Zones controller customers on July 12 due to a credible external security threat. Access was restored on July 14 after Progress developed and released patches for the high-severity vulnerability affecting versions 5.x and 6.x. The vulnerability requires administrative privileges and allows authenticated admins to read arbitrary files accessible to the application service account, write attacker-controlled content to arbitrary directories, or enumerate the server file system. Progress claims no evidence of customer data compromise. Security researchers note the aggressive response for an admin-only vulnerability suggests there may be additional undisclosed attack context. Action: update share file storage zone controllers immediately. Assume exposed systems may have been compromised. Perform forensic analysis before considering remediation complete, as the vendor response suggests higher risk than the admin privilege requirement would typically warrant. Source: Security Week. VMware Avi Load Balancer 7 Severe Vulnerabilities. Broadcom, patch 7 critical and high-severity vulnerabilities in VMware Avi Load Balancer. CVE 2026-47865 is a critical authentication bypass, allowing attackers with network access to breach the Avi control plane. 3 high-severity flaws: allow authentication bypass, arbitrary code execution, and privilege escalation to root requiring network or local access, and are high-severity directory traversal and privilege escalation flaws. Is a high-severity remote code execution vulnerability requiring authenticated network access. No in-the-wild exploitation reported, but VMware products are frequently targeted, and 6 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: apply Avi Load Balancer updates immediately. Review access logs for suspicious authentication attempts or unusual API activity. Source: Security Week. Rockwell Automation Critical ICS Industrial Control Systems Vulnerabilities. Rockwell Automation patched critical vulnerabilities in industrial control systems. CVE 2026-10577, CVSS 10.0. In the 1715-inter Ethernet/IP adapter exposes a network-accessible debug port without privilege controls, allowing unauthenticated remote access to intrusive CLI commands. Attackers can read or delete files, stop tasks, modify memory, and change I/O states. 3 critical DOS vulnerabilities in compact logics, control logics, compact guard logics, and guard logics controllers can cause major non-recoverable faults. High-severity vulnerabilities were also patched in Flex 5000 adapter, FactoryTalk Data Mosaics, FactoryTalk Services Platform, Arena, Thin Manager, Studio 5000 Logix Designer, and other products. Action: update 1715-inter to version 3.11 or later. Update affected controllers and FactoryTalk products. Isolate ICS networks and restrict network access to control system devices following defense in-depth principles. Sources: CIS ICS Advisory Security Week. Treasury sanctions VPN service and crypto vendors enabling ransomware. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned First VPN service, 1VPNs, and its administrator, Ukrainian citizen Dmytro Rashevsky, for providing infrastructure to ransomware operators. 1VPNs advertised in cybercrime forums for over a decade, touting its refusal to cooperate with law enforcement. Ransomware groups purchased infrastructure to hide attack origins, deploy malware, and manage exfiltrated data. Victims include U.S. businesses, financial services companies, hospitals, and municipal governments. Treasury also sanctioned Belarus national Yevgeny Vladimirovich Sileyev for selling cryptors, tools to disguise ransomware and malware, to ransomware operators. Blockchain intelligence firm TRM Labs tracked payments ranging from $58 to $723 for services. Europol arrested the 1VPNs administrator in May following a sting operation. Action: block network traffic to 1VPNs infrastructure if identified in logs. Review historical network data for connections to sanctioned entities. Organizations conducting ransomware incident response should check for 1VPNs indicators in forensic artifacts. Source: Cyberscoop. Next section, Windows/AD security. Kerberos RC4 hardening complete potential login breakage. Microsoft's July update completes the multi-year Kerberos RC4 hardening by removing the RC4 default disablement phase rollback switch. After this update, RC4 works only for accounts specifically allowed through registry or group policy. Organizations that relied on the rollback switch since the crackdown began in January will need to ensure their environment supports AES for Kerberos authentication. This change can break logins if systems or applications still depend on RC4 and have not been migrated to AES. Action: test Kerberos authentication in non-production environments before deploying July patches widely. Verify all systems support AES-based Kerberos. Identify any applications or systems still requiring RC4 and plan migration. Monitor authentication logs after patch deployment for Kerberos failures. Source: The Hacker News. Active Directory Domain Services Remote Code Execution, CVE 2026-49164. Microsoft patched CVE 2026-49164. A critical heap-based buffer overflow in Active Directory domain services, allowing unauthorized attackers to execute code over a network. Microsoft did not assign an exploitation likelihood rating. Action: apply July patches to domain controllers. This is a critical RCE in ADDS and should be prioritized despite no public exploitation. Source: MSRC. ADFS denial of service, CVE 2026-54983. Microsoft patch CVE 2026-54983, a stack-based buffer overflow in Active Directory Federation services, allowing unauthorized attackers to deny service over a network. Action: apply July patches to ADFS servers. Source: MSRC. WSUS tampering vulnerability, CVE 2026-50328. Microsoft patch CVE 2026-50328, an uncaught exception in Windows Server Update service allowing unauthorized attackers to perform tampering over a network. Action: apply July patches to WSUS servers. Source: MSRC. OAuth client ID spoofing in Microsoft Entra ID2 threat actor clusters are exploiting OAuth client ID spoofing to enumerate accounts and validate stolen credentials in Microsoft Entra ID environments without generating successful sign-in events. The technique leverages spoofed OAuth client ID and authentication requests to Microsoft's OAuth 2.0 token endpoint using resource owner password credentials, ROPC, flow. By analyzing error response codes, OAuths, attackers infer whether accounts exist and passwords are correct without triggering standard telemetry. UNK Pyrec 2323 targeted over 1 million accounts across 4,000 tenants from January to March 2026 using 700,000 plus spoofed client ID from AWS infrastructure, causing lockouts for 28% of targeted users. UNK Outflare AZ targeted over 2 million users with 3.7 million randomized spoofed application ID from Cloudflare infrastructure starting in December 2025. Action: monitor Entra sign-in logs for entries with application ID but no corresponding application names. Hunt for authentication attempts from AWS and Cloudflare IP ranges with unusual patterns. Review ROPC flow usage and consider disabling if not required. Implement anomalous authentication, pattern detection beyond successful sign-in events. Source: The Hacker News. Next section, General Security News. ICS Patch Tuesday. Siemens, Schneider, AB, Rockwell Industrial Control System vendors released July Patch Tuesday advisories. Siemens published 9 advisories, including 6 with critical vulnerabilities. CVSS 10.0 token invalidation flaw in OpenCenter X allows authentication bypass and full application access. Critical vulnerabilities were also patched in Mendix, City's secured smart plug, Symantec S7-1500, Cadra, and Desigo CC, enabling DOS attacks, code execution, data theft, and privilege escalation. Schneider Electric patched high-severity vulnerabilities in IGS, allowing arbitrary code execution via crafted files and an authentication bypass in EcoStruxure Cybersecurity Admin Expert. ABB addressed vulnerabilities in Advanced Master Online Builder, DLL, Dynamic Link Library, search path handling leading to unauthorized code execution, and TMAC+, file disclosure, broken access controls, stored cross-site scripting. Germany's VDE Cert published advisories for Mur Electronic, Mettler Toledo, Codesys, and Wago products. Action: review advisories from ICS vendors relevant to your environment. Prioritize critical authentication bypass and RCE vulnerabilities in internet-facing or critical ICS systems. Apply patches during scheduled maintenance windows following ICS change management procedures. Sources: Security Week, CISA ICS Advisory, CISA ICS Advisory. Next section, Patch Priority. Microsoft SharePoint Server CVE 2026-56164 0-day, Unauthenticated Privilege Escalation, CISA KEV July 17 deadline. Microsoft ADFS CVE 2026-56155 0-day, Local Privilege Escalation, CISA KEV July 28 deadline. Sonic Wall SMA 1000 CVE 2026-15409 and CVE 2026-15410 0 days, SSRF and code injection, CISA KEV July 17 deadline. Progress Share File Storage Zones Controller Path Traversal 0 day, update immediately. Rockwell 1000, 715 Inter CVE 2026-10577 Critical Authentication Bypass to debug CLI. Microsoft Windows 622 vulnerabilities, including critical RCE flaws in DHCP, Office, SQL Server, VMswitch. VMware AVI Load Balancer 7 vulnerabilities, including critical authentication bypass. Next section, Vulnerability Disclosures. Microsoft Patch Tuesday High Priority CVEs, beyond 0 days, beyond the 2 exploited 0 days. Microsoft's July release includes several high-priority vulnerabilities. CVE 2026-57092, CVSS 9.9, in Windows VMswitch allows attackers to escape VM boundaries and compromise the host system. CVSS 9.6 is a command injection RCE in Microsoft Copilot, allowing unauthorized code execution over a network. CVSS 9.6 is a spoofing vulnerability in Exchange Server that Microsoft flagged as more likely to be exploited, allowing unauthorized network-based spoofing. CVSS 9.8 and CVSS 9.8 are deserialization RCE vulnerabilities in SharePoint exploitable by unauthenticated attackers over a network. 11 critical RCE vulnerabilities are rated more likely to be exploited, including heap-based buffer overflows in Windows DHCP Server, Windows DHCP Client, Windows Media Foundation, MSMQ, Windows Server Network Driver, Minecraft Bedrock Dedicated Server, and Microsoft Dynamics NAV/365 Business Central, and 13 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: prioritize patching for CVE 2026-57092, VMswitch VM Escape, Copilot RCE, Exchange Spoofing, and SharePoint RCE. Review the 11 more likely to be exploited critical RCE flaws for applicability to your environment, and 4 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Sources: Talos Security Week Dark Reading. AirPoint JWT Authentication Bypass, CVE 2026-55040, Rapid7 disclosed CVE 2026-55040, a JWT authentication bypass in SharePoint that was used in a PWN2 own Berlin exploit chain. Rapid7 rates it CVSS 5.3, while ZDI reads Microsoft's rating as 9. 1 critical. A 4-point spread. Rapid7 chained this bypass to a separate RCE vulnerability to achieve unauthenticated RCE against vulnerable SharePoint servers. The RCE component is scheduled for patching in August 2026. The July patch breaks the exploit chain by fixing the authentication bypass, but the RCE remains unpatched until next month. Action: apply July patches immediately to block the authentication bypass. Monitor for August patches to address the chained RCE. Limit SharePoint exposure and deploy behind authenticated reverse proxy. Source: The Hacker News. Windows DHCP client and server RCE vulnerabilities. Microsoft patched multiple critical heap-based buffer overflow vulnerabilities in Windows DHCP services. CVE 2026-50370 and affect Windows DHCP server, exploitable by unauthorized attackers over adjacent network and over a network respectively. Is a use after free in the Windows DHCP client, allowing unauthorized attackers to execute code locally, and are additional critical DHCP server RCE flaws. All are rated more likely to be exploited. DHCP client vulnerabilities are particularly concerning for public Wi-Fi attack scenarios, and 4 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: apply July patches to Windows DHCP servers and clients. Prioritize DHCP servers exposed to untrusted networks. Educate users about public Wi-Fi risks until client patches are deployed. Sources: Talos Sanzisk. Windows Armacast driver RCE. CVE 2026-54982, CVE 2026-54995. Microsoft patched 2 critical remote code execution vulnerabilities in the Windows Reliable Multicast Transport Driver, Armacast. Both are heap-based buffer overflows exploitable by network-adjacent attackers. Exploits require network-adjacent access, limiting the attack surface compared to remote vulnerabilities. Action: apply July patches for systems using Armacast. This is lower priority than remote exploitable vulnerabilities, but should be addressed in regular patch cycles. Source: Sanzisk. Third-party component vulnerabilities in Microsoft products. Microsoft's update includes patches for vulnerabilities in third-party components used in Microsoft products. CVE 2026-15028 affects libarchive heap overflow while parsing tar archives with PAX extended headers. Affects GitHub CLI. GH Codespace Jupiter could allow RCE when connecting to malicious codespace. Is a privacy leak in goes crypto/TLS affecting encrypted client hello. Affects Perl, integer overflow in SMeasure, struct leading to out-of-bounds heap read in pack and unpack. Affects goes OS package, root escape via symlink plus trailing slash. Affects RabbitMQ, unauthenticated disclosure of OAuth client credentials via HTTP API endpoint with certain OAuth 2 configurations. Affects Perl, incorrect rejects matches when alternation exceeds 65,535 fixed string branches. Affects node tar, uncaught exception DOS via NUL byte in PAX path/link path records, and 7 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: apply patches for Microsoft products using these components. Review use of GitHub CLI, RabbitMQ, and other affected open-source components in your environment. Sources: MSRC, 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 and 7 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Additional critical Microsoft. CVS Microsoft patched additional critical vulnerabilities across its product portfolio. CVE 2026-42975 is a heap-based buffer overflow in Windows Bluetooth port driver, allowing RCE over adjacent network. It's a relative path traversal in Age of Empires Roman II, Definitive Edition, allowing RCE over a network. Is a use after free in Windows SSDP, allowing RCE over a network. Is a deserialization vulnerability in Microsoft Dynamics NAV, allowing RCE over a network. Is a DNS client tampering vulnerability, allowing authorized attackers to perform local tampering due to missing authentication, and 4 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: apply July patches across the Microsoft product portfolio. Prioritize network-facing services and core Windows components. Sources: MSRC, 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 and 4 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Next section: trends and context. This Patch Tuesday represents a pivotal shift from monthly patch cycles to continuous high-volume security updates driven by AI-powered vulnerability discovery. Microsoft's M-scanning harness is surfacing vulnerabilities at unprecedented rates, with 622 CVEs, nearly triple the previous record. Organizations face growing prioritization challenges as AI dramatically increases the volume of flaws requiring attention. The traditional approach of reviewing every CVE, or common vulnerabilities and exposures, is no longer viable. Defenders must focus on exploited vulnerabilities, CISA KEV additions, internet-facing systems, and critical infrastructure first. The 2 SharePoint 0 days and Sonic Wall SMA exploitation demonstrate that despite the higher volume, active exploitation remains the primary triage criterion. The aggressive vendor responses to SharePoint and Progress Share file incidents, combined with CISA's detailed hardening guidance, signal that on-premises collaboration and file sharing infrastructure has become a sustained attacker focus, requiring defense in depth beyond patching alone. That concludes today's cyber threat brief. From Carolina Clear Tech, stay patched, stay vigilant.